Hello everyone, this is Malix. A guildmate of mine had asked me to do a video on how to use the Summoner's War optimizer. Um, a lot of people have been asking me, the best way to make use of it and try and get the most out of it. So I decided to make a video and then share it with everyone so that hopefully anyone can get some helpful tips from this. So the Rune optimizer that I use is the Windows 10 version. I find it to be a lot quicker and faster than the web version, which is understandable because the web version is being hosted and the Windows 10 version is using your own computer's resources for doing the calculations. So your computer is obviously not getting bogged down with all kinds of traffic, so for the most part it is quicker. So basically when you first open up the Rune optimizer, you get this screen and you can import. I already have one set up, so mine's already done, but you would have to go and pick a file and then import it. I'm not going to explain how to use the Summoner's War proxy. That's what you need to use in order to work. There's plenty of videos out there on that, so if you need to know how to do that, you can just go look up Summoner's War proxy and there's a video where you can at least learn how to use that. So first up, I just want to talk about the menu items here. You have the import and export. You have the runes, where this menu shows literally every rune that you have with the stats, what level they are, the grade, and etc, etc. The efficiency percentage is actually a plugin, and it's actually a calculation that Barian, who's probably the best Summoner's War player of all time in regards of all aspects of the game, he came up with this calculation that will determine the efficiency of a rune based on the substats and the substat upgrades as it levels up. It's actually a really nice tool to look at, especially if you're thinking about grindstones and enchanted gems. But for starting out, don't really pay too much attention to it. That's not until you get later game where you're trying to find that minimal upgrade. You already have a lot of good runes, but you just need that small upgrade in order to take your monster to the next level, and the efficiency calculator can help out with that. It also helps you determine if a rune is worth even putting a grindstone into it, but you can ignore that. Other than that, everything is pretty much this, just what the rune is and some stats. Excuse me. Now this, the action column, the X in a circle you can delete. The padlock is unlocked, meaning that the rune is unlocked. It's available to be put on a monster. Now if I were to lock it, I can no longer make a rune build with that rune because it's prevented, and that's very, very important for you to understand. So there's also the advanced runes where it goes into even more detail. So you can see how here it just kind of gave what the location of the rune is, what set it is, slot, grade, level, efficiency, the main stat and the value, and the init stat and value. But if you were to go to the advanced section, then it will show you all the stats and what stat each rune has. So it's advanced. It gives you more detail on the runes you have, and it does come with some sorting or filtering here. So if I want to try to figure out what the hell runes is on Lagmaron, I can select them and then I can view those runes on him. Or if I'm just trying to figure out what kind of revenge runes I have, you can select the revenge runes and say I'm looking for a slot 2 hit point rune. Then I can see all the slot 2 hit point runes that I have on revenge, their current values, again the grades, the levels, and etc, etc. So that's kind of useful for trying to figure out what do you even have for runes? Um, there is a grindstone now. This is new, and it's nice because you can select a monster that you want to grindstone, and it'll actually go through and calculate where you can make some improvements. So you see here I have an endure gem that I can put a speed grindstone on to boost up his speed. So it's nice because it can actually calculate, what monsters you have that can benefit from grindstones, as well as a list of the grindstones you already have, or even enchantment. Say you want to do an enchantment, it even gives you a list of monsters that can be enchanted. For example, right here, there's my galleon. I can take this HP flat and enchant it for a crit rate too, if I wanted to. But pretty interesting, something new. And like I said, the efficiency calculator really will kind of take part in that. It will play a pretty good role. And then you can even get a list of all the grindstones and enchantments that you have. Now, I haven't really been doing a whole lot of raiding, so I don't have a whole lot, but that's just the newest feature to this, and I think it's pretty interesting and pretty cool. The next menu item is a list of your monsters. Not a whole lot to it. You can view base stats or actual stats of the monsters. Really, there's really not a whole lot to it. You can select which monster you want, view the base stats, the actual stats, and the plus 15 stats of their runes that's already equipped on that monster. And it's pretty straightforward. If you say you get a new monster, but you don't want to go through the entire import-export process because you have builds you already done, well, then you can manually add a new monster here by just doing, whatever. You can go and look up the monster stats at level 35 or 40 if you want to see what potential it could have, just by going to Summoner's War Wikia and looking up the monster. But that's pretty much it. You type in all the stats individually, and then you say create new. Don't do save current because, for example, I have Theomars. If I start typing and changing things and I hit save current, it's going to change the Theomars here. So always hit create new when you're adding a monster. Now say you have a monster in here that is only 5-star, like my Galleon, and I 6-star him, but same thing, I don't want to go through the process of importing and exporting. You can actually just go here, change him to 40 because he's 6-star now, and then put in his level 40 stats, and then save current because you're updating him. You're not creating a new one. So that's pretty much it with this screen. Now we go to the optimizer part. Now there is a lot on the screen, and I will do my best to kind of go through every single part of it and hopefully give you some tips and tricks. Now, up here is where you pick the monster. I'm going to go Theomars because I already know what build I want to put him in or what runes, so hopefully he'll be quick. And you can see right below the selection, you're going to see his base stats. Now, I already know, pretty much all his base stats are not important, but if you're curious, it's just a nice little info tool right there. And then over here, set 1, set 2, set 3. Now the reason there's 3 sets is because you can have technically 3 2-set runes on there, but generally, there's 4 sets and there's 2 sets, whatever. But I know for a fact, based on the runes I have, I want my Theomars to be Violent Focus. And then I want him to be Speed, crit damage, and attack. Now, you can do... They do have attack flat in there because some people, say on a slot 6, who may not necessarily care about accuracy or care about resistance or anything, they get a legendary flat attack rune, especially on Swift, that has, say, a speed substat and they're curious of what they can get for speed, and they end up getting max rolls and they have a super high speed substat. That is a good example, especially for Bernard, of a flat stat rune that you would want to keep, and which is why the optimizer includes those flat stats in there, because there could be that one rune that is a diamond in the rough that has some amazing speed substat that you want. So that's why you see flat stats in there, but generally you want to select the percentage for obvious reasons. You get the most out of it. Now, options. This is where it can get important and a little tricky. So top option is use locked runes. Now, as I mentioned before, when you're looking at the rune area, you have the option to lock runes and prevent them from being used. However, say you get a new monster and you put them in here and you're curious what the potential could be with great runes, you can check that off, and now the optimizer is allowed to use every rune you have because you're allowing it to use locked runes. And then here is use only runes from inventory. It's kind of similar to locked runes, except it's only going to use the runes that is in your inventory. The location is inventory. It means they're not equipped to a monster yet. Whereas if I selected, any monster here, it's not going to use any runes on Chisoon because they're already equipped. So that's what that means. It literally means use only the runes that have not been engraved to a monster yet. And then there's an option here where you can only use runes that for slot 1, 3, and 5 that are plus 12 at least. So I'm sorry, at max. It's an option that I never use because if the optimizer ends up finding, say, a level 6 rune that has great substats, I'll use it and I'll just skill it up. So I don't quite understand why this option's there, but it is. This option, you can use it. It's literally you're only going to use 6-star runes for slot 246, meaning you're going to have the max attack percentage on slot 2. It's going to be a 6-star, so 63%, and not a 5-star, which is only like 51 or 52 or something. I don't use it right now because I just don't have a lot of runes, especially violent. Violent runes never want to drop for me, so I never use it. I use a lot of 5-star runes, but if you decide you don't want to use any 5-star and you want to use 6-star only, you can check that off. However, there could be a situation where a 5-star rune has a lot better substats than a 6-star rune, and you're going to miss out on that if you have this checked off. So I never check it off, but it's up to you. And then you have the option to use only 5 or 6-star runes, period. I don't keep 4-star or less, so I never use it. But if you're a beginner and you're trying to get away from using 4-star runes, or you have a lot of 4-star runes and you don't want to use them, you can check that off. Here you can, there's 2 different options. There's include and do not include runes, and the way you use this is you actually say you just got this really good new rune, and you went to here and you added it in, you put in all the stats and whatever, put in all the stats and you create a new one. Well, you can actually go and then view that rune in the list. Just 1 second. There we go. You can go and view that rune and use this column here on the left, the ID column. That is the number you use when you want to include or not include runes. So for example, I know I have a really good focus rune that I want to put on my Theomars, and I know it is a slot 2, and I know it is a speed. I can go and view it here and get the ID. Alright, I want to use rune ID 44 in my build. So I would go here and say include rune ID 44. And if there's another rune that I want to use, I would separate it by commas, and then I would type in the next one, and then the next one. And that's how you use that. And then it's the same exact concept for not including runes. Say I don't want to use rune 44 or 123 or whatever. You can type that in, and then the optimizer will not include those runes when it's doing its calculations. I use it sometimes, especially when I get, say, a brand new rune that I'm super pumped about, and I want to see what Theomars is going to look like with it before I actually engrave it. So that's pretty helpful. Here, focus. Focus can be good and can also be awful. Focus is a tricky one to use. Basically, when you select a stat for the optimizer to focus on, it is literally going to look for every possibility to get the most amount of speed, and it can really ignore other substats that could potentially do you a world of good. So tread carefully when using focus. Times that I've used the focus feature is, say I'm building a Bernard and I want my Bernard to be the fastest he can absolutely be, and generally with Bernards you don't care about any other stats but speed, so you can actually go and set it up so that all you want is speed. I'll throw HP and accuracy there because I kind of do. My Bernard's only a 5-star, so I do kind of want him to be able to survive in case he isn't the fastest. But generally speaking, Bernard, you only care about speed. You want him to move first, so you just focus strictly on speed. And the rune optimizer can help you with that. Actually, just kind of show you. So right now, I want my Bernard on a Swift set, slot 2 speed, and then I don't care about anything else. There is an option here for you to not use broken sets, meaning it's going to use a 2 set so you can get the bonus. First starting out, you may not care about that because you'll be kind of surprised that some of the best builds you get do have broken offsets just because of the substats. But if you don't care, or if you don't want to have a broken set, check that off, and then it will give you a 2 set bonus. But again, you could ignore some potential good stats and a good build because, like I said, the best build might be a broken set for an offset. So I'm going to leave that unchecked because I'm just going to do an example of a Bernard. I'm focusing strictly on speed, so every single rune it's going to look at is going to have speed. And it's going to give me the potential of, what my Bernard can be as far as how fast he can be. And then you just hit optimize, and it'll calculate the number of builds, and then it's going to prepare it for a display. Now, here's the next part. Here are the builds that it's come up with, and it seems like there's a lot of information there is, but it's pretty easy to start using once you get a hang of it. So you have 3 different tabs. There's the actual stats, what the stats are going to look like at plus 12, and it's actually doing another calculation. I never use plus 12. I always use plus 15 because with the plus 15 stats you get an idea of what he is going to be at max, and I'm always going to want to max out almost all my runes, so I generally look at the plus 15. And now you can actually start sorting, so you can see there's multiple columns. You can sort by rune ID, sets, hit points, attack, defense, all the way up to even their effective hit points, or effective hit points with a defense break, or even you can see how much damage they can do based on formulas someone created, but I'll get into that later. So I'm just focusing on Bernard, so all I care about is speed, so I'm going to sort by speed, and you can see that the fastest I can get my Bernard, period, is 260 speed, and it's using a speed, attack percentage, and accuracy runes. Now, I personally am not going to use that attack percent rune because I feel I can have more benefit using that on someone else. But again, I didn't say he had to be hit points here. I didn't say he had to have accuracy. So now if I do this optimization again, but this time with those slots selected, you can see I only have 14,000 instead of the 28,000 it had the first time. And you can see now I've got some different results. So now the fastest I can make my Bernard is 257. And he's got, could have 17,000 hit points here. He could only have 15,000 hit points here. It all depends on the substats. Now, say I wanted it so that my Bernard had at least 70 accuracy. That's where the filters come into place. So I want my Bernard to have at least 70 accuracy, and I want him to have at least 250 speed. You can put a cap on here if you wanted to, but I personally haven't used it unless I'm speed tuning. But with Bernard, I want him to be the fastest, so I don't need the cap. And once you put in those filters, just hit apply, and it's going to change everything down here again. So now you see that the only stats I can see are 70 plus accuracy and 250 plus hit points. Speed, sorry. So then say, alright, well, now I want to get as much hit points as I want, or even, how, the best resistance I can get. And you can start sorting it down and really kind of fine tune it once you start filtering it this way. And now you can see, based on these filters here, I only have 2 builds that will meet those requirements. Now again, because this is Bernard and I just want him to be as fast as possible, I'm only focusing on speed, and I just hit clear here and it'll actually remove all those filters. So now there's only 6 builds that are 257 speed, so I'm actually just going to put 257 here as the minimum. And there's the 6 builds that I can now compare to each other. And just looking at this, I like the 77 accuracy. I like the 17,000 hit points. It's super speedy. So I'm going to select this build over here. And now you can see a kind of a breakdown of what your monster's going to look like with these stats. So you have his base stats. The actual stats, meaning that using the runes, power-ups, and skill levels and substats it currently has without any additional power-ups, this is what your monster is going to look like if you were just to engrave those right now. And then if you were to obviously plus 15 and max all those rune levels, this is what the stats would be. And then you can compare it to what the old stats were on the monster. Now you can see that this build was actually the same build I had already set up for Bernard, because you can see, look, location Bernard, location Bernard, location Bernard. These runes are already engraved on Bernard. But now, say you like this build. Obviously, I like this build because I had already chosen this for Bernard. You can go over here and use the equip runes button. And what that's going to do is equip those runes to Bernard or engrave them. So now if they were on another monster or say in the inventory, they're going to get moved to being located on Bernard. And then this is the important one right here, but also the tricky one. And it can potentially screw you up if you don't remember this. Lock the runes. Because if you don't, and you say you go and do another monster, say like a Galleon, who's on a Swift build as well, and you do the same thing, you want to focus as much speed as possible because you want your Galleon to move after your Bernard. It's going to use the runes if they're not locked. So careful there. I always make a habit of equipping and locking the runes right after, and make sure you look up here and see the notification that it went through. And that's it. Then you can go to your next monster and start doing other builds. I'll do a Theomars because, like I said, I know exactly what I want for a build on him because I've already done it. Not Fatal Focus. And I'll show you this one now. Now, do make sure you clear out the filters here. I don't want to focus on speed. I'm not focusing on anything because I want to see what all builds I could possibly get, and then I'm going to filter through, that way. If I did care about him having a lot of speed and then wanted to look at what the other stats would be like, I could do that focus, but you do lose out on a lot of other substats because it's just ignoring any runes that don't have speed on it. So I generally don't recommend that unless you're doing like a Bernard build where you just want as much speed as possible. But so let's go Theomars. I do want violent focus, speed, crit damage, attack, no filters set up. Let's optimize. Depending on how many runes you have depends on how quick this can go. Now, I am focusing strictly on violent and focus runes, and you can see there's still a possibility of 218,000 builds. So imagine if I didn't select focus and I left that open, well, the number of builds that could show up would be greatly increased and take a long time for it to calculate it. So that's why I put focus, only because, again, I've already done this. I know what runes I want, and I know that the build that I wanted happened to be a violent focus build. So it's just going through now. It's already calculated the number of builds. Now it's just preparing them for display below. So it'll just be a couple more minutes. Now, you can do other stuff while this is going. You can go and look at these runes. You can go and, say, do some setting changes or whatever. Then come back and, it's still going to run. You don't have to be strictly on this screen in order for it to optimize. So I just wanted to point that out. So it's almost done. It's just preparing the final stuff for the display. Now you can see that I still have it sorted by max speed. I'll show you later how I generally go about, building an attacker, and then I'll do another one where I'll go about, say, building a tank. Alright, so here, now you can look, I have it sorted by the fastest I can get my Theomars based on a violent focus, speed, crit damage, attack build, and that is fast. That is really fast, but look, 1600 attack, 44 crit, 127 crit damage. It's not impressive as far as damage output. Theomars is an attacker. He's, maybe the fastest, but if he doesn't hit hard, well, it's not going to really be that much of a benefit to you, now would it? So at this point, what I want to do is, I know I want my Theomars to have at least 85% crit rate, because with his elemental passive, he gets a bonus 15% crit rate on every monster because he always has the elemental advantage. So by having a minimum of 85% crit rate, I will essentially have 100% crit rate later on every monster. So now this is looking a little better. I have 85% crit rate minimum. I could sort it by crit damage next, because no matter what, I'm always going to have 85% crit rate because of this filter. And now look, wow, 184 crit damage, but it's not the speed I like, and it's not really the attack that I want. So I'm going to actually put another filter in here and say I want at least, we'll say 175 speed, and this is really going to narrow down the number of builds there are. So now you can see here, number of builds found is 2,339. I'm going to apply this filter, and now there's only 58. And I believe this top one is the one I ended up choosing, but now I can get 157 crit damage, 85 crit rate at 181 speed, and 1700 attack. That's not bad. I could go with this one here, because it does have more attack power, but let's now look at the damage column. The damage column, it's I wouldn't go solely on it because it's just using this generic formula, like a standard formula for it. You could go and select option 2 and actually put in your own multipliers, and if you know what the enemy's defense is and skill ups and yada yada yada, so you can really get down to the nitty gritty with it, but that requires a lot of research and knowledge of what monster you're specifically attacking. And I personally just rather use a standard formula, but there is the option for you to put in your own multipliers. And you can sort by the damage output. So now you can see that the build that will put out the most damage is this one that has 1782 attack power, 176 speed, 85% crit rate, 147% crit damage. And that's nice, but I want a little bit more speed. I don't mind sacrificing 66 attack power for 5 more speed, because if it means that my Theomars will get a turn in before the enemy because I might have 3 more speed, I'm gonna want that. So I'm actually gonna select the second build, and as you can see, I've already have it engraved to Theomars, but I selected it, and now I'm going to equip. Wait for it. There it is, and then I'm going to lock it. So now if I do another build using a violent focus type set, it's not going to use these runes because they're now locked to Theomars. And now I have 2 builds up here that I've done. There's Bernard, and then there's Theomars. So now let's show you, say, a tank. Let's go with Darien. Darien I want to use on frontline and raids, so I want him to be at least a revenge monster. I don't want any broken sets here because I want to try and maximize his stats like resistance, so endure runes, or defense with guard runes. And I'm actually going to go and select just straight up 3 hit point runes percentage for those slots, because I just want him to be as tanky as possible. So now it's going to go ahead and do some optimizing based on the revenge set being the requirement of one of them, leaving it open for the other 2 sets as long as they're not broken. So this calculation can take a while. Actually, I might just cancel it and try and get a little bit more specific so that it doesn't take as long, because you can see it's taken a while. So I'm going to hit stop. You just hit the stop button if you ever want to stop and cancel a build. I'm going to add in Endure, and then I'm going to add in Guard, and see what kind of build I can get from Revenge, Endure, and Guard. Hit Optimize, and now we can see the type of stats I can have with those rune builds. So this is where effective hit points can come in handy if you're building for a tanky monster. You can sort and see how effective his hit points are going to be and how much damage he can take effectively before dying. Now, it's just based on another formula. I don't know how accurate it is, but what I do know is I want my Darien to have at least 60% resistance, because if someone has a 40% lead, that means he'll have 100% resistance. Again, I'm using him in frontline raids. So now my effective hit points has dropped down. I need Darien to be able to apply his debuffs too. He has the defense break and the attack break. So now I could sort by accuracy and see how much accuracy I could get. But look, his hit points would only be about 35,000. If I go back and sort by effective hit points, well, I guess it's still 35,000, but look, he has a lot more defense than that original build. But, looking at this, I can get 70 resistance, so even if someone only brought a 30% resist lead, he'll still have max resistance, and he has 41% accuracy, which isn't terrible. Now, what if I drop this down to a 50 minimum and hit apply? Well, now look, 37,000 hit points there, 1100 defense. Now, say I want to focus on defense. I want him to be a hit point, hit point, hit point build, but let's see what I can get for defense substats. And the most I could possibly get is 1187, but look, it's only at 34,000 hit points. So there's a lot of things to look at and kind of take into account, but once you get a hang of it, you can really do well with it. Yeah, so I just selected this build randomly, and you can see, look, I have an Endure rune here that's currently equipped to Chisoon. A Guard rune currently equipped to Crawler, Sekhmet, Baladian, Zhongfei. So it gives you an idea of what runes you can put on your monster for the best stats, but also who you're going to affect by taking those runes. So you can see that I'm going to break my Chisoon's build, I'm going to break my Sekhmet's build, and etc. So that's where the whole locking comes into play. If you don't want a monster to lose a rune, you can lock that rune. You can just look up the ID, say 236, go to the rune, and let me just clear this. Go to the rune and actually search for 236. Come on, what am I missing? Oh, right here. So search for 236, and then you can select it, and then you can actually exclude it, or just hit the lock button right there, or I'm gonna unlock it because I don't care. So that's just another way to go about it, and that's essentially it. If say you select a build and you don't like it, you just hit the remove button and it'll remove it, and then you can go back to the optimizer and select a different one, and view it, see who's it's affecting, like my Ritesh, and again, if you don't like the stats, hit remove. Now say that you've done all this, you've done it on every monster, and then you go through free rune removal, and then a month goes by and you've got some new runes and you've added them, but say you don't like any of the builds you did, but so you kind of want to do a complete overhaul, you can go here to the runes and just select unlock all, and what that will do is literally unlock every single rune that is currently locked on every monster, making them available to use. So if you wanted to do a complete overhaul and start from scratch, you can do it. I generally don't recommend it because you could cripple some monsters that you may not remember that you don't want to touch. For example, like my Theomars, I like this build, I don't want it to change, so I'm always going to keep these runes locked. But if I went and hit unlock all, then I could potentially use the runes on him for another monster. So I'm going to keep him locked, and then just as a quick example, I'll show you, say, my Perna, Violent, Focus, and remove this one. Speed, just for example. That's what Theomar's build is, Violent Focus. Now my Perna, if I were to build him Violent Focus, he's not going to use the same, the optimizer will not select the same runes as Theomar's because they're locked. It'll give completely different builds based on those rune sets now. And I'll just show you that in a second. Excuse me. So now you can see that, you know, this is the stats I can get on my Perna on a violent focus. Let's say I can get, you know, 75% crit rate, but only 1600 attack. You know, I'm not going to do a violent focus build for my Perna. I just kind of wanted to show you that now it's going to calculate builds that does not include the runes from Theomars because those are locked. So that's pretty much the optimizer. That's all it is to it, and it is a nice tool, but you gotta, you know, kind of pay attention to every stat because you don't want to focus strictly on, you know, one stat. You know, for example, if I went Violent Blade on my Perna, focusing strictly on crit rate because I want him to try and get a max crit rate. It's like, yeah, I can get him to, you know, 93% crit rate, but his crit damage is low. So there's a lot of things you got to think about. Don't gimp yourself in one stat because you want to get high in another. You know, try and come up with a well-rounded unit, and just go from there. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and like, comment, subscribe.